Yesterday, friends, remember when we asked all of the teachers what they know about wood? And Mrs. Houseotten said she knows that you can build things with wood. Mrs. DeWert said she knows you can make a fire with wood. Mr. Eidsness says that he likes to build bowls and tables with wood. And Miss Ronigan said that she knows wood comes in lots of different sizes, going from itty bitty tiny like a twig to big huge like a tree trunk. And then we talked about how all wood comes from trees. So today we are going to continue exploring wood, but we are going to be talking about what happens when wood gets wet, just like this filter. It looks like I am soaked. We are going to be seeing what happens when we put water onto wood, and we're going to see what happens when we put wood into the water. We're going to be doing lots of experiments today, so be sure you have your listening ears on and be ready to grow that brain. Alrighty, friends, so let's go ahead and get started with our first experiment of the day. The first thing we are going to do is we are going to see what happens when wood gets wet. So we're going to be using the water, we're going to be using this dabber, and we also have our cedar wood sample here and our particle board wood sample here. We are going to be seeing what happens when both of these samples of wood get wet. I am going to also be working on your science journal with you. So before we get started, be sure you have your science journal and be sure you are on the second page. Once you have your science journal out and your crayons, I would love for us to get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my dabber to suck up just a tiny bit of water. Perfect. And we are going to see what happens when I put a couple dots of water onto the cedar sample first. Are you ready? Pay close attention to the colors. Pay attention to what happens to the water. Oh. So if you take a really close look at that cedar sample, does it look like the water is soaking into the cedar sample? Or does it look like it's just staying on top of the cedar sample? Let's see what happens when I try to move the water. Oh, it's not really going anywhere. Oh, there we go. I just got it to move all the way off of the block. Now if you look, you can notice that some of the wood looks like it's a little bit darker where we put that water. Let's try it one more time, see what happens. Remember, think about whether or not the water gets soaked in or whether it beads up and stays on top of the wood. Is it soaking into the cedar wood or is it staying on top of the cedar wood? To me, it looks like it's just beading up on top. So now I'm going to go into my science journal and I'm going to draw a picture of what the cedar wood looks like with water on top of it. So I'm going to use my brown crayon to draw that cedar sample. So I'm just going to really quickly draw the rectangle. That would be my cedar sample. I'm just going to draw the outline so I can be sure I can draw the water as well. I'm going to use blue for the water. And remember, I'm not going to draw the water soaking into the wood because that's not what it did. It beaded up on top. So I'm going to draw a bead of water and color it in. Perfect. And now I'm going to go back and color in the rest of my wood using my brown. Now I'm going to label this piece of wood because remember, we are seeing what happens to both samples. So I want to be sure that I remember this was the cedar sample. So now I'm going to take my erasable pencil and I'm going to label it cedar. You spell cedar C-E-D-A-R. Perfect. Alrighty, once you've drawn what happens when we use a dropper to put water on the cedar, we are going to see what happens when we use the dropper on a piece of particle board. All right, perfect. So here we are. back at our experiment. You see it's been a couple minutes and the water on our cedar sample still hasn't even soaked in. It is still beaded up on top. Now we're going to take our particle board and we're going to see what happens to the wood and the water when we put water onto our particle board. Pay attention to whether or not it beads up or soaks in. Pay attention to what color the particle board changes. Let's see what happens. Ready? Interesting. So on the particle board, it looks like it's beading up as well. I'm going to go ahead and get it to move a little bit so we can see. Remember on the cedar, it changed colors a little bit. Let's see if the same thing happened on the particle board. Oh, if you look right there, it looks like it also changed colors a tiny bit. Let's try it one more time so we can watch what happens again. I'll do a couple more drops. There we go. Alrighty, now I'm going to zoom into that particle board. Alrighty, and pay attention to the water. Is the water soaking in or is it beading up on top? Let's compare it to our cedar sample. They look pretty similar. It looks like the cedar sample and the wood sample, both samples had the water beading up on top. Awesome. So now I'm going to go back to my science journal and I'm going to draw the particle board and I'm going to show what happened on the particle board. So the particle board is a little lighter brown, so I'm just going to try my best. It's also in the shape of a rectangle. I'm going to take my blue crayon again. I'm going to draw another bead of water. Perfect, and then I'm going to color in my wood. Awesome, that looks nice. And then I'm going to take my erasable pencil and I'm going to label this one particle board. Particle board is a long word, so hang in with me. It's a P, A, R, T, I, C, L, E, B, O, A, R, D. Awesome. Once you are done drawing your particle board, we are now going to see what happens when we put the wood into the water. We're not putting water onto the wood, we're putting the wood into the water. So here is my experiment again. Here's a big bowl of water. Now we're going to see what happens first when I drop the cedar sample into our water. Here's our cedar sample. Are you ready to see? 3, 2, 1. Oh, what do you notice? Is the wood going into the water? Is it staying on top of the water? Is it floating? To me, it looks like it's really just staying on top. Even when I try to push it down, it comes right back up. Here, watch. Ready? Oh, there we go. It's all the way underwater. Oh, and it just pops back up. Crazy. So the wood is floating. Let's go ahead and see what happens when we put particle board in the water. Do you think it's going to float or do you think it's going to sink? Ready? 3, 2, 1. Ooh. Oh, I kind of made a mess. Oh, interesting. So if we look at our particle board, is our particle board staying on top of the water too? Sure is. Looks like our particle board also floats. Let's see if we can push this one down. Ready? I'm going to let it back up. 3, 2, 1. Oh, and it comes right back up. So both our particle board and our cedar wood float. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my science journal, and I'm going to draw a picture of what happens when we put the wood into the water. So I'm going to start with my blue crayon to show the water and the the thing we used is a circle. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to erase this goof really quick. I'm going to go ahead and draw that circle basin that we used in blue. And then I'm going to draw both the cedar and the particle board, and I'm going to draw them on top of the water because they were floating. All right, there's my cedar, there's my particle board. I'm going to color them in really quick. And then I'm going to take my blue crayon one more time, and I'm going to color all that water in. Cool. All right, and now that I'm done doing that, I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to write what happened when we put the wood into the water. Remember, did the wood sink to the bottom? Did it go to the bottom? No, it stayed at the top. That means it was floating. So I'm going to write the word float on my page right near both of these pieces of wood. I'm going to sound it out. Float. Perfect. So now that we are finished with our science notebook page, we're going to come back to our experiment just one more time. I am wondering, both of these samples of wood are floating, but is there a way that we could make them sink? Sink means that they go all the way to the bottom. So right now they're floating because they're at the top of the water. Sink means that they go all the way to the bottom of the water. So for example, my stylus for my iPad, this is so heavy it sinks. It goes straight to the bottom of the water. It does not stay at the top of the water. Let's see, what else do I have that might sink? Let's see. Do you think an expo marker would sink or float? Let's see, ready? Oh, kind of a little bit of both. It kind of stays right in the middle, but since it's not right on top, it is sinking. I'm going to think in my brain, how could I make one of these wood samples sink? I have an idea. I just went around my classroom and I found a rubber band and I found a whole bunch of paper clips. I think that if I were to use enough paper clips and attach them to a piece of wood, the paper clips would get so heavy that they would make the wood sink to the bottom of my water. I'm going to go ahead and try it out. I'm going to see how many paper clips it takes to sink my wood sample. And I want you to try and help me. Alrighty, friends. So here is our experiment. I'm going to take out the wood sample. Ooh, it's super wet. And I am going to wrap my rubber band around it first. And I am going to start with one paper clip. I'm going to see if one paper clip is going to make a difference. Remember, I'm trying to make all of this wood sink to the bottom. So there's one paper clip. I'm going to drop it in. Nope, it's still floating. Remember, floating means it stays on top of the water. I'm going to try a couple more paper clips, and we're going to see how many it's going to take to get this piece of wood to sink to the bottom. I'm just going to keep adding paper clips until it sinks. Oh, even closer. All right, this one's feeling lucky. Look at all those paper clips. Wow. Oh. Alrighty, my fingers are starting to hurt. I've been putting so many paper clips on this piece of wood. Alrighty, here it is. Let's see if this is our final product. Ready? 3, 2, 1. We did it! Do you notice how the wood is staying at the bottom of our water? That means we finally got it to sink. Woohoo! Awesome job. Now, we are going to see how many paper clips we had to put on this piece of wood to make it go all the way to the bottom and for it to stay there. I'm going to unwrap the rubber band. Perfect. Alrighty, are you ready to count with me? Let's see how many paper clips it took. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Wow! I put 18 paper clips on this one piece of wood to make it sink to the bottom. Remember, the wood floats at the top usually, but if you attach something heavy like paper clips to the wood, you can make it sink to the bottom.
Wow, friends, science was so super cool today. We got to see what happens when wood gets wet, both with a dauber and by putting wood into the water. We also got to see what happens when we add something heavy to the wood. Remember, when you put wood into water, it always floats, which means it always stays right on the top of the water. But if you add something heavy like 18 paper clips, then the wood gets weighed down and then it sinks to the bottom of the water. That stuff is pretty cool. Make sure that you did the science page along with me today, and then you are all done with science. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow.